Okay, getting into engine controls. This is the water stuff that came with the outboard. Two long shift throttle cables and a long wire loom, but they're not long enough, so they're gonna have to be cut. Got the outboard hooked up. I didn't have the benefit of seeing how they came apart, but I've figured it out. So we got battery hooked up. I've got a temporary gas tank. We got the electrical plugged in and the shift throttle cables. Run back to the original controls. So starting these engines with the controls hooked up was important to me, because now I know that the controls work. The choke works, the tilt works, the kill switch works, everything works. So after I cut these cables and replace them and then stuff doesn't work, I know where to look. It'll be on my end. The motors are fine. This is the wires from the outboard. There's one for each outboard. These three go to the tilt meters, so we're not going to use those. So that's three out of the way. And some of these brown ones are for the oil injection warning light. So when I figure out which ones they are, I think we're going to have the same number of wires here as here. These are the old wires coming from up front, which would be really nice. I won't have to pull any new wires. I can just use the old wires to extend the outboard. Put the original outboard tack on the workbench, and with some jumper cables and a spare battery, we figured out which wires turn on the little oil warning lights, so we can eliminate those. And again, we can eliminate the three wires that operate the tilt indicator, not the tilt itself, but there was an indicator thing on there, which is kind of silly because you can turn around and look at the engine. And hooked up the remaining wires, and I'm still short. I'm going to need 4 more wires going fore and aft to the front console. So while I'm working on the boat, my front gate operator dies, and it was still under warranty, so they sent me a new one, and it came with the cable that goes under the drive, but I didn't need it because the cable was fine under the drive. So of course I'm a pack rat, so I kept it. So it incredibly, it works out perfect for this. It reaches the front of the boat from the back, and it's got enough conductors, and we have 2 extra now, which I think I'm going to use for a temperature switches later on, if I can do that. So I've spent the last 2 days staring in this little hole. At least it's at good height. I don't have to bend over. But I got it. I got what I wanted. Starting from these big switches, power comes from the battery bank in the back to this first switch and jumps to the second switch on the hot side. The first switch turns on basically everything in the boat except for the motors. This will go through this 20 amp breaker and will feed whatever we put upstairs on the bridge. I don't know what we're going to do yet, but that's what that'll do. This wire feeds the existing panel, which is basically lights around the cabin. We're going to have to trace these out. We haven't done that yet. And let's see what else. This wire, the black one, goes back to the engine room and feeds that panel in the engine room. So when this switch is off, nothing anywhere in the boat is on except for the 2 bilge pumps. You can see this little wire will feed this switch for the bilge pump, and there's one like it in the back. Now, I wanted to be able to turn off the engines when we left, and I want to be able to turn off the engines when the kids are on the boat, so nobody does anything bad while somebody's in the water. So I put this one switch here. This is the other switch. Put this switch, and it was kind of challenging trying to figure out how to separate the 2 engine circuits with one switch. But I ended up just buying two small relays from the AutoZone. So this one disconnect, which you can turn off and remove the key. This one disconnect, you can hear them. Turns on those 2 relays, and those 2 relays energize 12-volt outboard batteries up to the keys, so they work just like a normal outboard. Turn on this light. I went to the electrical store to buy a disconnect like these here, and he talked me into buying these, and that's like the best thing I've ever bought. They fit on this DIN bar. It's called DIN. It's like the generic standard these days, and they're really cheap. Basically this costs the same as this, but the advantage is it'll take up to a number 10 wire, so it takes double 14s easily. These things pop right off, so you can take them off and look at the back and see what you're doing when you're working, because all these in the back, it's kind of tricky, but you can just pop them off. And another advantage is they have, it's like a funnel shape, so when you're in the blind trying to feed the wire, it goes right in usually. Now these are also available with fuses in the middle. These are straight through, these are just connectors, but you can buy them with fuses, which is kind of cool too. I wish almost wish I just started over and put all these everywhere, but this was already in the boat and it's a little bit of money, so this stays. So we now have, these are the two original switches for the inboards. This one's turned. I need somebody to help me get it straight. In the on position sends power to the choke, the tilts, which work, can't see, and the kill, which works all the time. And I don't know if you heard that, but it cranks the engine. So downstairs is basically done as far as the engine's running. The two fuel gauges I got to work, and the voltmeter works. Temperature, we might be able to add a sensor for and make it work. Oil pressure, that ain't gonna happen. And the 2 RPM meters probably will never be installed down here. These won't work, I don't think. So this is good stuff. Lots of progress. Lots of old wire. My shop is full of old wire. There's wire and trash everywhere. Like I said, my head's been in this little hole for 2 days, but I think I got it. There's a funny thing about outboard motor switches, at least this 2-cycle, this older version. There is really no on position for the key. For the motor, when you turn the key on, it energizes the, well in this case, it energizes the choke if you want to use the choke. It energizes the tilt if you want to use the tilt. It energizes the fuel gauge and stuff like that. But the motor itself, it doesn't care. It's like a lawnmower engine. When you crank it, it's going to start. And when you turn the key off, it doesn't care. You have to kill it with a short. So these 2 keys that came with the boat are built for a car engine. So one, they don't, well, they don't have electric choke in them, so I had to add a momentary switch for that. And when you turn them off, they don't short out the engine, so I had to add another momentary switch to short out the engine. And it took me a while to figure all this stuff out, but it's getting better every day. I've dropped the 2 cables that came with the outboard instruments from the bridge down here. I need to cut them to length and make them up here, and the upstairs will be ready to put the instruments in. Okay, I brought the big cables from the flying bridge and tied them in to the terminal block, and finished the extra 8 wires that I'd pulled from the engine room. I forgot about those. And I have 2 extra, like number 12s, from the engine room to here. So if I'm able to put a temperature sender on the outboards, I'm going to do that and use a temperature meter downstairs, because I don't have the little red light downstairs, the buzzer light.